love the power of the gavel. Thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting of March 27th. This is principally about budget development tonight. We have a chance to honor some of our winter sports folks at the beginning, and a couple other subjects, and a little bit of business in terms of approval of some contracts. But welcome. I want to call the meeting to order. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right behind me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming, and we'll make sure that we get our student athletes up here earlier rather than later in this agenda. And from an announcement perspective, I'll give an announcement, and then we'll get a adoption of the agenda. But we have talked here at this table several times about having a forum on safety and security. We have scheduled that now for Thursday, April 19th. It's going to be at 6:30 at night. Start at 6:30 at night, and it's going to be in the middle school auditorium right up the hall. So I just want to mention that when the superintendent gives some comments, I think he can give some updates as to some additional happenings with regard to safety and security, because it's on a lot of people's minds, and we want to let people know that it isn't something that we're forgetting here as we do budget and everything else. We're thinking about this. So with that, that's the only announcement I have, other than if the bell rings, there's an exit up here and the exit the door that you came in, and we'll split you and get you out of here quickly. We hope that doesn't happen. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Naomi, second. Christina, all those in favor? I should point out that Bob Presley, one of our board members, will be joining us at about 25 after 7. His son was in an event tonight, and he will be running over here after that. With that, we adopt the agenda and we move forward. This is a study session. It's one that's for the purposes of administrative updates, and tonight, especially as it relates to budget, there are no public comments at this meeting. Residents may attend the next meeting, scheduled business meeting. It's on April 10th after vacation, or contact the board via boe@shenet.org with any comments or questions. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer, are shared with the board and our superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions and concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and or designee. And I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Just a couple of date things. Just want to remind the board. Tomorrow, the day of dialogue for the high school is tomorrow, so certainly if you're available to stop by the Clifton Park Public Library, Half Moon Public Library, that'd be great. Also, just for the board's purposes, and I'll put more detail in front of the bulletin, the town of Clifton Park is forming a committee pertaining to the 37 acres that was sold to the town of Clifton Park. Mrs. Wetmore Chase, Kathy Wetmore Chase, will be the district representative on that committee, and we'll have Clyde Starkey, who's our director of facilities, as an alternate just in case, so we could always have someone present at that meeting. So we're looking forward to that. Just a couple updates related to the safety initiative that Mr. Casey mentioned. Certainly the students in the audience know this past week and even last week we have had a significant presence of law enforcement. Some of it was in response to some immediate unfounded threats by, unfortunately, students. And I say unfortunate because in several instances we have identified kids, and what students don't realize that those threats are considered felony charges. And as a young person, particularly a young person above age 16, that's something that could potentially follow you as a record. So I say it's very unfortunate because sometimes kids think it's a prank to write little things on bathroom walls or send out little Instagram messages, and especially things that's electronically based, because most things are electronically based. We could track right back to whoever initiated it. And so increased presence in law enforcement as a result of that, but also particularly what's happening across the country. Parkland in Florida was the most recent widespread event. So we have established a pretty strong relationship with Saratoga County Sheriff Department in particular, who have committed to remain, have at least sheriff deputy presence on campus, but particularly in the high school until the rest of the school year. We're in the process of having some conversations with them surrounding maybe a more long-term arrangement with the Sheriff Department. And in addition to that, we had a very interesting meeting this week. Not say very interesting, because it's funny, you hear about people like the CIA, the FBI, the ATF, Homeland Security. We had all those people here at Shen all at once in the same room. And it was just interesting, because you have these kind of images of what does a Secret Service guy look like. Well, he's just a clean-cut guy, look like he's 25 years old. But then he started reminding us that he was on the Protecting the President detail at one time, so you realize that, okay, he's not as clean-cut and kind as you may think he is. But the point of doing that, though, and it's important certainly for the board, but certainly for our public, one of the things we pride ourselves doing at Shen, not only in this case safety, but even academically, try to find out what are the best practices. What are the best practices? What are the things that are working? We don't necessarily want popular practices, because just because something is popular doesn't mean it's effective. What are the effective practices? And so we had a very, quite frankly, a pretty extensive roundtable conversation with a lot of people. Mr. DeLallo was present as a member of that, as well as Mr. Casey. And so we're trying to tap into the brains of people who live this stuff every day and live it in the most complex ways. Ways that we can't even imagine in terms of some of the details that these gentlemen and ladies have gone on. So we're doing that. We're getting information. We have several things planned as a result of some of the information from them. More to come. We're going to enhance our plans. We're going to review our plans. We're going to audit our schools differently, with different perspectives in terms of things that we're doing. Because we're doing a lot of things now as a school, and one of the things that we can't do is rest on our laurels to assume that because we have been doing a lot of things for a number of years, that those things are still the most effective way of doing those things. So we're looking forward to that. Mrs. Carmen, in particular, has been coordinating a lot of effort with all these law enforcement agencies, federal, state, and local, to ensure, again, we have the best minds at the table talking about how do we best provide a quality education environment for our kids. And I think that's the key part of it, because I know there are people who disagree with me, think that we should turn our schools into prison states. I don't think we should turn our schools into prison states. I think our kids need to be in a school environment where they feel as if it's school, and there's a high degree of comfort. And so how do we do those kind of things? In addition to that, part of the conversation focus on also how do we try to collaborate more with the Saratoga County Mental Health Department. I'm not sure if that's the right name. But how do we try to collaborate with them in terms of providing more resources to families outside of the school situation, because we've had some situations where we know that the family was desperately in need of support and didn't know how to access support. And so subsequently, how do we try to tap into those relationships as we move forward? And even as late as today at high school, we had a simple walkthrough with some canine dogs in the high school piece of it. And a piece that we always have to balance between how do we create a situation where by trying to enhance safety, you don't create more anxiety. But on the same note, we don't want to have it to be so haphazard that people don't take it seriously. So it's that find that nice sweet spot in between. And so those things are important because, again, the times that we're in, there's a lot of perceptions, but also realities. And so how do we balance the two things in our approach as we move forward? And I think by the 19th, we'll certainly have more detailed information to share with the public. We're also creating a schematic, if you will, that outlines some of the things that we can tell the public. And I say that because sometimes people want to know everything that we're doing, but I always say if you tell, it's like, well, we have athletes here tonight. If you tell the other team all the plays you're going to run, you're going to lose the game. So there's certain things that, quite frankly, only a handful of people actually know certain things that we do in the school district that address safety issues as we move forward. So a lot has been done. Lots being researched and studies, and more would be done. Even tonight, there's a budget allocation for $300,000 that we have earmarked to, as we uncover or identify certain things, to at least have resources to effectively do those things going into the 2018-19 school year. So that's just a thumbnail sketch, if you will, because oftentimes people think just because we're not talking about things, nothing is happening. But there, quite frankly, there isn't a day that goes by that we're not addressing some type of safety issue, some type of student need issue. That's the nature of the beast when you have 10,000 students and 1,800 employees, which goes to the last comment I would like to make, because the next dimension of this is, yes, we're looking at student safety, but we're also looking at staff in terms of staff mental well-being and things of that nature in terms of what resources do we have for our staff becomes a big part of the equation as well. So a lot of collaboration taking place and will continue to take place, and student safety has been and always will be a priority because, again, I tell people all the time, my most precious commodity in this world, my boys probably wouldn't like me saying that, but my daughter who's in 10th grade, and I'll say, guess what, if my kid is there, I love my kid more than any other kid, and if I could have my kid there, I'm thinking about your kid as well. And I don't say that lightly in terms of looking at students and a lot of the young people here tonight. Guess what? I have the same respect for you as your parents and the same love for you as your parents would in terms of your safety and your well-being, and we're trying to do the best we can as a school district to ensure we preserve that environment without creating that prison state that unfortunately some people think that we should be doing. So there's going to be an ongoing debate, and it's not a debate for me, it's a debate for others. But we know that some people have different perspectives on it, but we appreciate the things that are happening and certainly appreciate the support of the board.
And I think, I just I sent a note to the board yesterday after that meeting that we had. I just reiterate for the public, our superintendent took the lead here. I mean, we had agencies who, at times, in my experience over the years, sometimes compete. And the beauty of yesterday is, one, they came in with that attitude not to compete, but number two, Dr. Robinson didn't give them any time to compete. He just kept peppering them with questions and probing down and trying to get the best practice from several of them. And, you'd think, well, what's the Secret Service got to do with this kind of thing? And we were reminded by him, well, our principal job is to protect the president, the vice president. And here's where we see vulnerabilities in that. And your vulnerability isn't a lot different than ours. And here's what you need to think about in terms of where's the most vulnerable part of the day, when people are moving, and those kind of things. So everybody was contributing. The great news is from this district, and we know this as a strength of our district, is most of the people who were there representing those agencies, the state agencies, the lady, Homeland Security, 1992 graduated Shen, but most of the people live in our district, and they are intimately concerned about this. They have children in this district, and they're right there, as you point out, with your daughter and our daughters and sons and grandkids. They're right there, and this is front and center for them. So it was a great meeting, and thanks for your leadership.
Did they reach out to you?
No, we reached out to them.
The Secret Service as well?
No, we invited, and again, kudos to Mrs. Carmen. We invited all the people that we possibly think who can contribute to the conversation. And this is not a one and done. In fact, we have several things planned with several of those individuals beyond this point. And probably some point, maybe later, early summer, if you will, bring those folks back again to kind of get here's some things that we have done, what additional thoughts you may have, and just not to prolong this too much, but just using the FBI, for example. If you follow the Parkland situation in Florida, the FBI was criticized tremendously by the media and the public. Unfortunately, what people didn't understand is the interplay with federal agencies and state agencies and local agencies. Federal agencies don't come in. They don't intervene at all. They provide intelligence to state agencies, to local agencies, be it local PD or sheriff department. And so, but it's always easier, and we see it all the time, it's always easier to blame the person who's furthest away, that you should have done this versus first looking at what you should have done yourself. And so there were some lessons learned from the FBI that I think that they're now say, okay, there's some things that we probably should, the guy admitted, there's some things that we need to do to ensure that as things go back down the order, so to speak, to the local level, that we don't hand it off until we know that someone is holding the baton in their hand. And I think there were some assumptions made about when they passed the baton, who was holding it. So to speak, and so there's some lessons learned with that piece of it. So we're looking forward to seeing how some of the information that they're gathering, some of the intel they're gathering, some of the studies that they're gathering, how that's going to help. It's not only, again, we're pretty fortunate because we have a lot of head of these agencies live here, but these folks are working nationwide on some of this stuff, so we're pretty fortunate to be able to grab some of the information nationwide and enhance some of our plans and some of our protocols, but more important, some of our training. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from every agency there, that at the end of the day, we can have all the best equipment, we can have all the best, it comes down to people. It comes down to people because in every instance, not only school-related shooting, but in most crimes, there's someone else who knew about the intention before it occurred. And so the question is, how do we get particularly our young people to be in the mood truly, if they hear their friends talking about something, tell someone, because you never know what's a joke versus what someone is going to think is going to try just to be whatever. So and that's if there's a message, particularly it's important, we have a lot of young people here tonight, it's truly, if you hear something, tell someone. You know, we live in this society where people think, I'm a snitch, I don't want to snitch on my friend. Well, I guess at the end of the day, if your friend is doing something wrong, your friend is not your friend. So think about it from that perspective, and we need those voices, because particularly a couple cases that we have, if you want to say solved, came from the fact that other people said, okay, here's some information I want to share. And even if you're sharing without saying it's coming from me, we don't care, especially electronic information. You know, people are just, I'm going to say, I can't even blame it on our young folks, but it's amazing the things that people put electronically and think they deleted and it's gone. It's never gone. And so we track down a lot of stuff, and that's the beauty of having these collaborations with these agencies who have the capacity to track down even the counterterrorism group that they weren't there, but we'll be connecting with them. That's what they do all the time. You know, they just track stuff down online all the time. And so we're looking to tap into some of that, not to scare people, but the reality of it is when someone posts something on the whatever that social media is that you're going to look at for a period of time and it's gone. Snapchat. You can tell I'm not privy to the social media. Anything is gone. It's not. There's a way to get back to that as well. So a lot of good stuff happening, and a lot of good stuff will continue to happen, because at the end of the day, the young people who we're celebrating tonight, we want to ensure that when they come to school, when they go out to play and compete, indoors, outdoors, or otherwise, that there's a high degree of confidence that they have, that they're in an environment that they can be the best young person they can, and not having anxiety of, whoa, what's going to happen. And so that's also meaning engaging our young people that in case something does happen, what's your role? What's your role, and how do you react? How do you plan? How do you put yourself and others in a safe situation? So we always have to yes, expect the best, but we always have to have a plan to deal with the worst. And that's the balance of how we approach it in safety within our schools. So thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Casey.
yeah. And we'll move right on to Mr. Cullen.
So we're always pleased as Mr. Coleman comes forward. For people who are in the audience, so Mr. Coleman got a pair of glasses, and I thought he looked really cool in this, so I had to get my pair of glasses too. So
Trendy.
it's a trend that Mr. Coleman has started. Mine's to look for a distance, his to look close. So I had to take it off. I had to take it off to read, but I have to put it on to see out there. So
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for pointing out that I'm going blind. Okay, everybody, I want to thank the Board of Education and Dr. Robbins for coming up here. If I could just have the athletes' attention for a quick minute. And just to tell the board, we had 600 student athletes this winter in our winter sports program. We had 900 in our fall program. We'll have probably 550 to 600 again in our spring program, even a little bit more than that. But to our student athletes, we come here 3 times a year to celebrate our success. And the one thing that I want our student athletes to understand, and why it's important that we come here, is that you understand the role that these board members and this superintendent play in helping you accomplish your goals. Oftentimes we stand up here and we thank them for the opportunity to come up here, but tonight one of the things I thought about was making sure that you as student athletes understand the role that our Board of Education plays and our superintendent plays. When I make recommendations to them about things that we need for the budget, they go to Dr. Robinson, they go to the Board of Education, and those things are supported. And I was having a conversation with a student athlete today, and I was saying, tell me something that you lack in terms of a resource that you need to be successful. And the student athlete said, well, I can't think of anything. And I was explaining that that's a result of everything that everybody works hard in the Shen Athletic program. So tonight when you come up or you're here, be appreciative of the Board of Education that's here and Dr. Robinson and the role they help play to make you successful. Okay? Yep. On the same end, on the opposite side of that, I want everybody here to know that these athletes and coaches are not here by accident. They train to be champions. They train to be successful. They don't train to win. They train to build a process to be as good as they can be. And our coaches, it's interesting to me, I go around during the wintertime and I go see the indoor track and I go see boys indoor track and girls indoor track, and then I go into the wrestling room and I go into the gym to see basketball, or I go over to the pool and I see the swim team. And the fundamental tenets of success are all there. It's a good process that the coaches have to help coaches reach their maximum potential. There's this investment on the part of the kids to really want to be there and be successful. All the programs have these family-type cultures and atmospheres that make people buy in to the success over time. And that's why you're going to hear tonight some of these teams are up here, 10 times in 12 years, back to back to back, 3 times in 4 years. And these are very hard championships to win. And I'll get going here. We have 6 teams that are here tonight. We had 5 teams that won in the fall. And just to put that in perspective for you, we as a school district have won more than half the AA championships that are available. That makes us very popular with our opponents, but it's something we're still willing to take on. Our first team that we're going to have up here tonight, I always like him to lead off. He's here so much, you would think he's probably a board member. That's Coach Cloutier and our girls indoor track and field team. This is their 3rd straight championship. It's the 8th time they've won it. They repeated again. Just so you know, they scored 200 points in the indoor track championship. And you can only score 300. They scored 200. No team in Section 2 history has ever scored as many points as this team has scored. It was an incredible accomplishment. They have great athletes, great coaches. And again, you know him. You'll probably see them again in the spring. But here's Coach Rob Cloutier. Come on up. Girls track, indoor track and field. Congratulations, girls.
Good to be here again. 3 quick things from me. I got the best job in the district. I know you may think that. I do. I get to see these guys grow up. And this is indoor track, but, coaching all 3 seasons. Best coaching staff, Jen, Keith, Scott Dockett, Dennis Hogan, and Mike Marino. Amazing. They've bought into what we're trying to do. We're trying to make better kids. It's really not about the accolades. It's really about this process of these guys work so hard. Distance runners outside all winter, and sprinters in a hallway. And then secondly, they're here. They've bought into making everybody else better around us. So that's really cool. We have a young lady. She's going to represent us at West Point next year. I'm going to let her talk. Emily Denell.
Hello, everyone. I'd just like to say a few words about our team because I've been on the team indoor track specifically since I was in 8th grade, and ever since 8th grade, I wasn't really fond of running, but I think that Coach Rob really stressed the idea of relationships on our team, and every day, I've made my best friends here, and even I don't spend too much time with the sprinters, but even seeing them in the locker room, the relationships we formed at practices and the meetings before practices, where we kind of hype ourselves up for the workouts or whatever, it just creates a bond that is unique specifically to running in indoor track, I think, and it's just amazing to see all of our hard work because every day when we walk to practice, it's not easy. No one wants to go run 10 miles just for fun. But we know, afterwards, we're doing it all together, and we're going to, be better from it. So I think it's the relationships that really make us as good as we actually are. Thank you.
Okay, our next team that we'd like to recognize is our boys indoor track team. This is their 3rd straight time that they've been able to accomplish the Section 2 championship. This is a team that this year kind of came in, they were right in a dogfight with a couple of other teams for the championship this year. Had a great day down at SUNY Albany. really put a lot of things together. It was nice to see the team come together. The one thing that I really took, which was very inspiring, was at a track and field meet, it's very different than a wrestling match or a swim meet or a basketball game where everybody's kind of there on the sidelines. There's a lot of kind of time to mill around, and our athletes were really supporting each other, and we're running up to one another and saying, hey, you got to do this, and we need you in this event, and it was really good to see. And in events like that, every place matters. How every kid does matters, because it's the difference of a point here, a point there, which when you get to the cumulative total, Chuck and I talk about this all the time, is every point matters in these types of competitions. So without further ado, the 3 times defending Section 2 champions, boys indoor track and field, and Coach Jason Burlingame. Good job, Jackson. Yep, good job. Nice job. Good job. You guys, good job.
Thank you. I want to echo Rob's sentiment that we have the best job in the world, and it's a privilege to be a part of this team, this program, this district, and work with such great young individuals every day. I also saw their ears perk up when Dr. Robinson used the baton analogy. I know the relays were primed for this spring for some good things ahead. And this is the best, most well-rounded team I've ever coached. We had 27 boys contribute at sectionals and get on the podium. Huge number. There's 8 sectional champions, 7 runners-up, and 9 finishers. So guys that went home with patches from this group. And collectively, like the girls, I think there's just this air of family and hard work that goes into everything we do, just trying to make each other better. And to that end, I'm really most proud of these guys for the character education piece that they've tackled this season. We piloted the Coaching Boys in a Men program with the help of Becky Carmen, which is a sexual and domestic violence prevention program. We have a huge number of boys that are championing Jacob Monday's cause right now, who's a terminally ill Shen student, and I know they're just rallying, trying to get as much involvement on social media behind that front. And just to see these guys really give back to the community in those ways, it means the most of everything we do and why we do it. So I want to thank them too for all their hard work in those endeavors.
Thank you. Yeah, I know, right? Okay, our third team, moving right along here, our third team, again, this is always an interesting team to me because their home court or home field or home rink or home mountain is West Mountain, which is up in Glens Falls. I was talking to one of their student athletes yesterday and saying, we try to do everything we can to promote them, but, it's easy for the basketball team. The gym is 50 feet from my office. Alpine skiing is off up in Glens Falls. They do an incredible job. Our coaches are incredible. Rich and Matt do a phenomenal job. This is the second straight year that the boys Alpine has won the Section 2 championship. I was saying Rich has coached both the boys and girls to the New York State championship, and that's a feat that probably a lot haven't been able to accomplish. We have a lot of the members of the team. We got a couple members of the team here tonight. I saw Patrick, Coach Burnley, Coach Moran, come on up. They finished third in New York State. Our boys Alpine ski team, Section 2 champions. How are you? Good. How you doing? Good. I see you. Good. You guys did it. How you doing, Coach? All right, here you go.
Hey, Coach.
Well, I was going to say that same thing the other coaches did, that I've got the best job in the district too, but then I remembered back to those cold nights in December and early January when it was 10 below zero, and I'm thinking maybe it was the bus driver those nights. But as you can see, this is not a fellow over here. This is a young lady, Melissa Taggart. This is her 4th year on the team. She was the Section 2 Giant Slalom champion and the Section 2 overall individual champion this year. So that's why I brought her in. Our girls team had been here 5 years previous in a row. They finished 3rd this year by 3 points. That means if our girl had finished 20th in the slalom had finished 16th, all the girls would have been standing up here too. That's how close that competition was. The boys did a spectacular job this year. Chase Payton, our senior Andrew Parent, who missed out on the state team by 1 point last year, made it this year. And our fifth-year athlete, started with us in 7th grade, Pat Leonard. The boys did the job at sectionals. It was a tough day at states out of Bristol, and we finished third by not very many points, so they did a great job, too.
Congratulations, Well done, you guys. Well done. Great job. Great job, you guys. Good job.
We have just a couple more teams left. The next team we have, again, they're no strangers to being here as long as we've been doing this. This team is always here. This coach is he's a phenomenal coach. He's got a great staff with him, and he's one of the most. If you ever go see the swim team, this is one of the most motivating coaches that you've ever seen in terms of how the kids respond to him. And the thing that I always take whenever I watch Chuck coach is Chuck's passion for an athlete who wins the section is the same as the passion for an athlete who PRs and finishes 10th in an event. That same level of passion is always there towards his student athletes, regardless of how they do. This year, he had an outstanding team, undefeated again. And again, he will never tell you this, but I always love to tout it. In his career, he's only lost 2 matches in his entire career. It's a phenomenal record. I would put it up with anybody. This is again back-to-back championships. It's his 10th championship in 12 years. He had a state champion this year in Nick Lyden, who was coached by Dennis Hogan, our diving coach. And I would like to call up the members of the Section 2 Boys Championship Swimming and Diving Program. Come on up, boys. All right, keep sliding over just a little bit. Keep sliding over just a little bit.
We have tons of extra guys.
All right, boys.
They're all here, too.
Actually, 3 losses. But who's counting?
Who's counting?
And I get to wear shorts and a bathing suit to work every day, so I think I win for best job. But our quote that we used this year was a Vince Lombardi quote, and I think it kind of perfectly embodies our team, which was that perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. And one of my biggest pet peeves when people talk about swimming and diving is when they call it an individual sport, when you're talking to a reporter or somebody that's not really around it. Our team this year was very unique in that we won sectionals despite only winning 1 relay at sectionals, so we had no individual swimmers win an event. I don't mean that to downplay or make anybody feel bad. I say that because it was the collective spirit and it was the contribution of literally everybody on the team that helped us achieve our goal of winning sectionals. On the diving side, as Mr. Coleman already mentioned, for the first time ever in Shenendehowa history, we had a diver who was a state champion, who earlier this year in December broke a long-standing state record, and then followed that up by coming out on top and becoming a state champion. And also quickly, piggybacking off of what Mr. Coleman said earlier, believe it or not, we're going up on the 10th year of the pool. I know it seems like it just opened up, and obviously it's been invaluable and a huge, massive resource for our athletic team. But something that obviously doesn't get brought up a lot at these things is what a massive impact it has on so many different members of our community. And I think the best thing that it does, and that gives me the most pleasure, one of the biggest joys each year, is there's so many kids that come in through our physical education programs that have never been exposed to swimming, that have never swam before, and to see them from where they start to where they finish and they're comfortable and they learned how to swim and have gained a life skill like that you can't put a price on that, and you can't put enough value on that, and that happens repeatedly in every class that we see all year. So I just kind of wanted to say once again, thank you so much for having that wonderful facility for our whole community. So thank you. Yeah.
And I just want to, I just want to highlight, I want Coach Hogan to come up here just for a quick minute. Not a lot of you probably know who Coach Hogan is. He's our diving coach. Coach Hogan also serves as our pole vault coach for outdoor track, but he coaches diving during the winter and then goes and coaches pole vault in the spring. But to say he doesn't help out with pole vault during the winter, he's constantly working with our pole vaults during the winter. We won the Section 2 championship on a Saturday. We went on a Saturday evening, and I got up the next morning. It was February 18th. Went down to the bubble down at U Albany, and I got there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Coach Hogan was there with the pole vaulters, making sure that they were prepared so that Coach Burlingame and Coach Dockett could be over coaching the other events that they needed to. It just shows the type of dedication that our coaches have here at Shenendehowa. Very proud of that. They're all dedicated, but that's just one example. So thank you.
Well done, you guys. Congratulations. Awesome.
This year, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association started a team championship for wrestling. We knew we would be in the mix. We knew we'd be in the mix for the team championship. As most of you know, wrestling has been a phenomenal program for us here. Coach Weeks has another one, a very similar record to Coach Dunham in terms of success. There's a reason, again, why the team is successful with that culture. This year was the first year that New York State held a team dual meet championship. We knew we would be in the mix. We went up to a 4-team tournament, Averill Park, Columbia, Ballston Spa, Shenendehowa. We were actually seeded 4th, finished 1st, went to the New York State Championship. Had a tough time in our pool out at the state championship, but it's the first time they had it. It was a great experience for the boys. The one thing that I was talking to the boys about that I know that they really enjoyed was the opportunity to represent Shenendehowa as a team at a state championship, the way the basketball team does, the way the baseball team, lacrosse teams, all those teams get the opportunity to do that. So without further ado, I know Coach Weeks has got a bunch of his wrestling coaches here. He's got a phenomenal staff, and he's got a great group of wrestlers. So come on up, Coach Weeks and our wrestling team.
Okay, first of all, of course, thank you to the board members for recognizing us. I'm always honored to be here as a representative not only of Shenendehowa School District, but of the wrestling program. Similar to Coach Dunham, we're not only a team sport, but we're an individual sport, and we had the opportunity to take part in both of those scenarios at the state level this year, which was, like Mr. Cullen had mentioned, the first time ever. Our program has competed in a dual meet tournament in years past that has recognized an individual or team champion, and we've won that honor. And it's an even greater honor to be the first team in Section 2 to qualify for that tournament this year. So I'd like to give the entire group a hand for that accomplishment this year. Nice job. Additionally, of course, the sport of wrestling, as the season progresses, it becomes an individual sport. So we end up at a state tournament. We've been lucky to have it at the TU Center for the last several years, and it will probably remain there for the next several years. We had 2 wrestlers compete at that event this year. Kieran Shanahan was a 2-time state finalist. He was probably wrestled arguably the best finals match in the history of the tournament, lost to one of the best wrestlers in our country, and we think he beat him, but the referees don't agree. Dr. Robinson agreed with me that we thought we beat him. So Kieran, a 2-time state finalist. And not to be outdone, we had a state champion as well. So we are very fortunate to have Steve Apulin in our school district. This is actually his first year in the district, and he is the first 9th grade New York State champion since do you remember the year?
High 80s, I don't remember.
1992, but Steve Apulin
Steve O'Pullen won the 99-pound weight class at the state champion. He is a ninth grader, so we're looking for maybe 3 more of those as we go. So Steve O'Pullen. Finally, they do keep a team score at the state tournament, and these 2 guys were at the event, and our team finished 8th. So that also was a pretty impressive feat. So I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing without the support of Mr. Coleman, with Dr. Robinson, and definitely without the support of my coaching staff. I'm fortunate in that regard as well. So I would like to thank them and thank you guys for recognizing us. Thank you. We have 1 team remaining here tonight, and our final team. Just one other thing that I would like to capture for everybody here tonight, and if I could just get our wrestlers to just kind of hear this real quick. We were at the basketball game, and a lot of times our events conflict time-wise with one another. So I had gone down in the morning to see the wrestlers in the semifinals, and I went down and I saw Steve-O and Kieran wrestle down at the Times Union Center in the morning. And then we had a boys basketball game, a quarterfinal matchup at Hudson Valley. And we went to the game, and I said, geez, I won't be able to get down to see Kieran, and we have to have an administrator at those games. So I wasn't going to be able to get. So Dr. Robinson said to me, oh, hey, I'll go down and represent the school district and see Kieran and Steve-O. And I said, oh, great, make sure. So him and Mr. Agustinoni went down. And I'm just highlighting that to kind of show you the support we have from Dr. Robinson, who is at basketball, is sitting there at basketball, leaves at halftime to make sure that our wrestlers know that there's support from the administration and from the school district. So just highlights kind of some of the great stuff we have going on. Our boys basketball team, again, no stranger to being here. This is the 3rd time in 4 years that they're here. They'll be the really tall guys that will get up here in a couple minutes and come up to the podium. I saved them for last. I think this was a really enjoyable boys basketball season this year. A great collection of student athletes with a coaching job that is one of Coach DeZekis' best coaching jobs throughout the course of his career. We played Shaker in the quarterfinals that night. We were down 9 points with 4.5 minutes to go. Shaker never scored again. We wound up winning the game. We went and we played CBA. Coach DeZekis had an incredible game plan to take their best player out of the game. We wound up beating them pretty comfortably. And then we went and played Colony. And just to put it into perspective, that hey, you probably wouldn't want me to share this, our quarter-point scoring in the Colony game was 11 points in the first quarter, 2 points in the second quarter, 26 in the third, and then 4 in the fourth. So it was very interesting. It was a very interesting game, a real defensive battle. I would be remiss to saying it was a great basketball season. This team progressively got better as the year went along. They had some tremendous efforts from a group of seniors. Really enjoyable year. And then as an athletic director, to watch a coach to be in sync with his team, the way that Coach DeZekis was in sync with his team, whether he was calling a play out or whether it was in practice, to watch them go in practice and then go up to a game in these very large facilities and execute the game plans, it was phenomenal. It was a joy to watch. I know he's been here before as a state championship coach. Personally, for me, this, I think, was his best coaching job in terms of what he was able to do with this team and get them as far as he was able to get them, and then their effort that they put forth to help make that a reality. So without further ado, I'd like to call up the tallest team here tonight, and Coach DeZekis, the boys basketball team. Come on up. Stay right there. Good. And you guys stay right there.
Well, I would have a recommendation. I feel pretty good about myself as a coach. I got great kids. I love where I coach. I wouldn't want to trade it for the world. But I come here, and I think it's the second time I've gone last.
Yep.
Quite often I go last. And by the time I'm called up here, I listen to all these coaches who should be like in Sports Illustrated with their records, and I feel like the biggest loser coach in the entire room because I am. They do a tremendous job, and I'm honored to coach here at Shenendehowa, as all the other coaches are. One thing that I heard repeatedly over the last month is that we overachieved. We exceeded expectations. One thing that I've learned over the last 3-4 years is to kind of tune out the expectations from the outside. A couple years ago, we were ranked 23rd in the country. How they came to that conclusion, I don't know. But that can really affect how you coach, how the pressure you put on yourself. This year, I went into the season and said, you know what I want? I want great kids who are going to listen, high character kids, and that's exactly what I got. We won a sectional title not because we were the most talented team. We won a section title. I know at least 2 out of the 3 games, we had the best kids. We had the high character kids. We had Shenendehowa kids who listened, looked at you when you spoke to them. Like Mr. Collins said, they would go to practice. This is what we're going to do in the game, and they would execute it. They never pointed at each other, never got down on each other. We were down in 2 to 3 games. And like you said, we scored 2 points in the second quarter. And at halftime, there was no yelling at each other. There was no, getting down on the coaching staff. No, this is what we need to do. For 1 quarter, you executed. The second quarter, you didn't. Third quarter, they came out, scored 26 points. You just did a great job. And it was just a pleasure coaching them. They should be very proud of themselves. They earned the Section 2 title. I really want to thank Dr. Robinson, who, the bigger the game is, he's into it way more than I am. I know that for a fact. He sits right behind me. Mr. Cohn, actually, I'll save you for last, Mr. Cohn. My coaching staff, Yak Singari, Coach Shas, who were just tremendous all year long. Dolph Beyer, who comes in when he can. Coach Joss, tremendous. Coach Gills, who's our freshman coach, and Coach Yattaw during the postseason came in and just lit a fire. They come in with so much enthusiasm, a different perspective, just did a tremendous job. Mr. Cohen, I want to thank you, and I express this to him. When you have somebody behind you and who's guiding you, and I've been coaching for just about 21, 22 years. He's been around for about 14 of them, I would say. It's really easy to believe in yourself when you have somebody who believes in you. And that's a great lesson he's taught me. So, I really appreciate you, Chris, and his team appreciates you and everything, all the support you give us. Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Robinson, I present to you 6 teams today. I apologize for going a little bit longer, but we did have 6 teams. We have hundreds of champion athletes. We look forward to a great spring, and hopefully we'll get some warm weather here at some point and get our kids out on fields and get out of gyms. So, anyways, thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me, Gary, we'll have one comment from the board. Gary?
I just wanted to say how much I really and truly appreciated not only this competitive success and the positive attitude of the coaches and the kids, but I particularly like the comment of our swim coach. I'm a former Saratoga Red Cross water safety chairman and a WSI trainer. I also did some U.S. swimming coaching on my own. But it is the water safety aspect that you talked about and the value of the pool in our physical education program that I really and truly appreciated. I expect a coach to appreciate the facilities they have for competition, but many of our really outstanding facilities are a terrific value as far as physical education is concerned, and sometimes we overlook that when we're celebrating our success as athletic teams. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. As we move forward with the meeting, I'm sure that these student athletes want to go home and cram for the work that they've got for the next 2 days before they're on vacation. So with that, we'll give you a pass to leave at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
See you.
You go from full house to no house.
Poor people. Yeah, don't tell us you got the best job in the district.
People
I
don't
want one of
want,
those jobs that shows up in shorts.
For the record, I started.
so that means, does that mean the bridge versions of everything?
Yeah, we will.
I know.
We will.
Yeah.
I think I'd already went. You'll ever go home.
Just want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you very much, Mr. Casey. So for the remaining audience that's sitting in the back, feel free to come up front. We have two presentations tonight, and we'll be somewhat brief, but actually both of the presentations. The first presentation pertain to our Smart Schools Bond Act, and Mr. McDermott will walk us through some of the details that I think is important for the board to understand. And also, I would like to ask Mr. Gilbert and Mr. DeLallo to offer any comments because they were at that meeting when we first presented this to committee. But this is it's a presentation, but there's also a technical aspect to this presentation as well. So board presented to the board is more than just a presentation to the board. There's a process piece that goes with it. And then we'll follow that with an overview of our budget presentation. I say overview because based upon the audience, we may not necessarily go into the full presentations since we have, in fact, made the same presentation to the board a week or so ago. And at this point, I just checked, just even sitting here to see if there's been any news from the state, no news from the state budget. And so until we have any additional news from the state budget, we really won't have any more updates as well. So we anticipate probably April 10th board meeting before we actually have an update, and that's when we actually be asking the board to potentially adopt a budget. So I shared that in advance that we may not necessarily walk through every detail of every presentation of the slides, but it's an ongoing process. So, Mr. McDermott.
Thank you. Sure, thank you. So, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here to talk to you about the Smart Schools Bond Act and the plans that we propose for the use of those funds. Just a little bit of history. Smart Schools Bond Act was approved by the voters in 2014. It provides about $2 billion for the state to be allocated to schools based on a formula. Our particular share at Shenendehowa is roughly $3.9 million. So there's really about six areas that we can use these funds for. And when we look at these slides, you'll notice that some of the bullets are bold-faced. Those are the ones that we're going to be focusing on with our projects here at Shen. So the first one is classroom connectivity infrastructure, wired and wireless. To a large part, we've taken care of a lot of the wired infrastructure and the wired as well, but we've got some areas that we still need to address. We'll talk about some of the specifics of that. Other areas that we could have used the money for is classroom technology, mobile devices, things of that nature. We're in very good shape in that respect because we've got a very responsible plan. Community connection, if we needed to run internet connectivity through the community is an area that we could choose to work with. Also improving pre-K and kindergarten classrooms. And eliminating temporary buildings, trailers, things like that. The other area that we're really looking to focus on, and it's very poignant, I think, is the school security and safety aspect, because we definitely have some areas that we need to address there. Some of the things that we cannot use Smart Schools Bond Act funds for is to pay salaries, to pay for software, and for professional development. However, there is an expectation that the district will have to contribute to this, especially with PD. That's such a big part of what we do here at Shen. So as far as the technical requirements for the Smart Schools Bond Act funds, we do submit a tech plan. We have a local tech plan that we've actually aligned with the Future Ready framework, which is very closely aligned with the state tech plan as well. And whatever we identify as needs within that, or whatever we're addressing with Smart Schools has to be identified as a need within that tech plan. As far as the submission types, there are some things that can go through a streamlined process. If we were just purchasing classroom technology, computers and things like that. There's a streamlined process. We basically tell them what we want to purchase, we purchase it, and then they refund. It's certainly not that fast, but that's a streamlined process. What we're talking about is a capital project, so it's a longer process. And we're trying to dovetail this with the capital project that we're doing with the upgrade to the tech and science and art area as well. So some of the areas that we're looking to address with respect to the security, we took a look at the video surveillance. That's an area that's currently under development. We're working on that project right now. We're also doing work on the keypad and swipe access to the buildings. So those areas we feel like we're in very good shape with. However, our PA system and our phone systems are not integrated very well, and we don't have the capacity to do things like an all call to the buildings and things like that. So that's the area that we're looking to focus on. So as far as the process,
Let me just ask a question on that. So Oliver mentioned earlier in his opening remarks about funds that we had in the budget and a total of like $300,000 that we're looking at. To do this that you're mentioning now is outside that, right?
Correct.
Outside that, but
correct.
doable.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing, and I know he's going to get into it, is this money it's I want to say free money, but it's money that's going to allow us to do what we want to do and not impact the taxpayers because it's money that's coming from the state.
Yeah, that's right. And I also think it's a very responsible way to use the money because the things that we're looking at are long-term investments as opposed to short-term investments for mobile technology and things like that. So as far as how we came to the things that we wanted to include in this, we met as administration. We talked about initiatives that we wanted to move forward in the district. We took a look at strategic plans for the district. We took a look at the building condition survey, and we tried to boil all those things together and come up with things that we really wanted to target with this process. The first step is to put together a plan and then review it with the Smart Schools Bond Act Committee. We did that. We presented it to the Smart Schools Bond Act Committee, got their approval to bring this plan to you. It's referred to as the investment plan. And then with that, so we did that actually yesterday. We're here today. This is the first review of the plan. With your blessing, we will then be able to move this forward. We'll post the plan on the district website for no less than 30 days. And then on May 8th, at the May 8th board meeting, we'll be able to address any public comments that come forward. While it's posted on the website, there's an email link there. People can submit comments. We can address those comments. And with your approval at that point, we can then move forward with submitting things to State Ed for approval. And it's a pretty lengthy process, so we're really trying to push it along.
Can just stop there for a second? I just want to make sure that any questions from board members about the process piece?
Just one quick question, because I know you said capital, projects will need to be approved by SED. So some of them that might include some of these security things,
This
that
will all
can
go
be
through SED.
delayed, and that could be delayed just so the public knows. Sometimes we have intentions of putting forward this, but it's not, we just can't just make those changes without some approvals.
And very good point, Mrs. Rajat, and that's part of the reason why we're actually doing this process now, that we hope by May we'll be at a point to submit plans and specs and things of that nature to the State Education Department. Unfortunately, we think the State Education Department might be faster in their process. The big part of it is approval of the funds through a committee that come out of the governor's office. That's where the holdup has been. And as recent, I think it was last weekend, I shared, we have some local legislators who are lobbying the governor's office pretty hard because the process to get projects approved for funding has been extremely slow. And it's not an issue of money because this was on the books, as you saw, a couple years back. So we hope that and more schools are doing safety-related projects. So we hope because of that dynamic, they'll expedite that process, and hopefully some point in the 18-19 school year, we'll start doing some of these projects. That's the ideal. And again, we have to, but that's the reason why we're trying to do this early now, so hopefully let's try to have some impact in 18-19.
Thank you.
After we submit our initial proposal, the Smart Schools Bond Act review process actually takes a look at what you've submitted, and we may be able to streamline parts of the project. I'm hopeful that we might be able to, but because of the way everything's tied together, I'm not sure that's going to happen. Another thing that we're doing to try and leverage the amount of reach that we have with these Smart Schools Bond Act funds is part of building out what we need to do includes things like fiber optic cabling and buying network switches and things like that. Those things are covered by E-rate. E-rate is federal funding. We get about 40 cents back on a dollar for those things that we get funded for. So we're currently in the process. We actually just submitted the paperwork for covering that cost of it. So instead of the 3.9, we'll get a little bit more than that to pay for the project. So areas that we're looking to address. The first part, and I hesitate to kind of present these two things separately because they're really going to be integrated into one system. But our current phone system is about 17 years old. It's about as hard to find somebody who knows how to work on this system as it is to find replacement parts. Both are becoming a real issue. So it's very long in the tooth. It's something that we need to address. And we're looking to address that by implementing a new IP, which is it's a network-based phone system. It has a tremendous amount of capability, and it's much, much more reliable. As we do this, you're going to see this unified communication piece. This is what ties this together with the security piece. So integrating a public address system with that. And as far as some of the advantages of an IP-based phone system, really pretty much everybody in business and education is moving to IP-based systems. It has the ability to integrate things like social media, email, video conferencing. Your phone number actually follows you, so depending upon what device you're on, your phone kind of comes with you. Interfacing with our Wi-Fi network. Another thing that's really nice about it is a lot of the functionality that's built into these systems is software-based. So as far as adding future enhancements, you're updating software as opposed to hardware. And then the big piece of this is the integration with other systems, the public address system, and so on and so forth. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to make sure I'm on the right slide here. So the other piece is taking a look at our existing public address system. This, very much like our phone system, is about 17 years old, very difficult to maintain. Parts are a problem. Finding people that want to and can work on it is also an issue. So that, again, we're looking to move that to an IP-based phone or an IP-based PA system, fully integrates with the phone system, allows you to do things like an all call to all of our buildings, pre-recorded messages for like a lockdown, things like that, public addresses. So one of the nice things about this too is it's very expensive to run all the cabling and install all the speakers and everything. With this type of system, we'll be able to reuse a lot of those assets that are in the buildings. One of the really nice things that we've seen is that there are special speakers that we can use in large areas like a gymnasium and an auditorium, where when there's a lot of noise in there, the volume needs to go up. When it's quiet, the volume can come down. These types of systems will auto adjust to the ambient noise in the area. And again, integrating with those other systems. If you think about like when the fire alarm goes off, the doors automatically close. Allows you to do things like that. You could do that with like if you had a lockdown, could automatically integrate with those other systems.
You mean from like district office, you could lock all the schools down?
Yeah, right from a phone. It's, you know, there's a lot of integration there, but yeah, the capability is there.
Certainly from an all-call perspective, you
Yeah.
could do it
Right.
from anywhere,
Yeah.
which right now
That's
we
nice.
can't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we currently really don't have the ability to get on one phone and talk to all the buildings in the district, which I think is a definite problem. Part of this project, and this is where we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of things, but we have a lot of fiber throughout the district that is not, it's not operating to the best of its ability. We're looking to test it and re-terminate a lot of that fiber to make sure that we have the best connectivity throughout the district. And in some cases, we may need to reinstall some fiber. Another thing that we're looking to do is to provide another path to High School East where we have a disaster recovery center. So making sure that we have connectivity to all of our buildings from 2 different locations within our district. Another really important part of this is when you have everything running on your network, how do you keep your network up, especially when there's a power outage? So we're looking to address a lot of power needs across the district. Some buildings have generator backup power, not all of them do. What we're hoping to do with this project is to provide generator power within every building out to all of our closets where our network gear is, and then also be able to use that generator power to also help with things like you know, our refrigeration systems, security systems, to make sure that those other very important systems are sustained through any kind of power outage. The alternative to this is using battery backup. Extremely expensive, very hard to maintain over time, and it's very limited time periods compared to generator backup. The last thing we're looking to include in this is reserving some funds for the project that we're going to be doing with renovating the tech wing, the science classrooms, and the art classrooms. So part of that's going to be retained for that project as well. So all of that together, we've got some line items here. Based on projects that have been done in other school districts, similar types of projects, we've come up with these numbers with our architects. You know, this is a starting point. These are by no means any details, but we feel pretty confident that we can work within these numbers.
So,
Any questions?
you know, one question I wanted to ask, you know, everything is great here. I followed it yesterday and fully support it. We talked about the potential that these numbers are, we're purposely figuring a little bit high to cover our butts.
Yeah.
If the numbers do come down, we still have that money. We still have that
There's-
$3.9 million. We can reallocate it to other things.
Yeah, that's a great point. There is no sunset on the Smart Schools Bond Act fund.
At least, no.
We're still thinking now.
He's so much more
So
cynical
it's still
than
got to be an SED approved
Right.
project.
Right.
So
Yes.
it might delay using it.
So if you wanted to use it for safety issues down the road.
As long as it fits in those
Falls into that,
categories.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So after this meeting, you post it on the district website, and then that starts a clock?
Can you just go back to that one slide?
Sure.
I just wanted to be sure I understood this. And you receive public comment, and then the committee reconvenes?
Yeah, just so, we'll get the public comments, we'll share the public comments with the board when we come
Okay.
back on the 10th, on the 8th, I'm sorry. And then at that point, we'll be saying to the board, here are the comments we made, here are any modifications as a result of those comments, and here's what we're recommending.
And
Okay.
back to this, so we have a required budget hearing, public hearing on the 8th of May, and that, it looks like you're using that as well
Oh,
to
right,
Yeah.
receive some
So
comments.
there's currently an email address set up, Shen, SSBA comments at shenschools.org. It's linked in this presentation. It's there for public comment, so, and the presentation's posted on the website. People can send in their comments, and then I can forward that to Dr. Robinson, any comments that come into Dr. Robinson, and then we can address them at that May 8th meeting. And if everything is good with everybody, we can approve at that point, and then we can start moving the process towards state ed.
Okay, so to get state ed approval? at
Yes,
that point.
correct.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
It's a hurry up and wait game.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, it's not a quick fix.
Yeah, I did have a comment. I've always been reticent about replacing technology that seemed to be working perfectly fine. Well, first of all, this is not working perfectly fine. But beyond that, it is no longer supportable. And probably the most compelling reason is it has capabilities that our present technology simply will not support. The integration of this is significant. I mean, it's one thing to know when somebody's coming into the building. It's another thing to be where that happens, but not having access to some means of notifying everybody else. If you are there, you witness it, you have a cell phone, virtually everybody does, you have the capability of notifying the entire building that this is transpiring, and everybody gets to respond almost instantaneously. We do not have that.
You know, so you bring up another point, even though I don't know if you were making this point, but it has me thinking this now, and that is redundancy. So is there, especially for an emergency system that has, is going to be relied on for communicating to the entire district, you know, and so what is the redundancy system in place for the phone system? Because it's such a basic system.
So we have hard line coming in that we'll
Yes.
keep.
We
Okay,
have,
so the
we have
hard line-
copper lines in every building.
Okay,
We
so
Right now.
the landline,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We have that, what we call a bat phone.
Yeah.
And there's failovers
I like it.
from, we have a primary and a secondary. Like, for instance, right now, even with our current phone system, if the system in our data center in High School West goes down, it fails over to another system in High School East. And each building also has a capability to go in what we call survivability mode.
Okay.
It backs up onto those copper lines, so we still have communication. But, yeah.
Good, thanks, Ted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I ask the board's indulgence on one thing. I always, when I notice, after all those kids left, I said, what's Augie doing here tonight? And his wife. We do have two very small items. They're not small in terms of dollars and they're important to the district, but on action items, I'd like to ask your indulgence that we consider action items B and C. Capital project bids we received. The recommendation is to go forward. There's a number of alternates in there. It looks like we're able to get within the funding we had, everything that we wanted with regard to those projects and get those enhancements at the same time.
Had been in the queue so long, we were getting nervous that
You want to do the motion in
Yeah.
discussion?
Well, as Augie's coming, can I have a motion on this?
estimates.
First, second,
This is
Christina?
for, this is for.
This is for B and C.
B and C.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry.
So
Our fear was
Christina
that
and
we
Todd.
Todd, yes.
had actually gone beyond, we have escalation built in for time. We were starting to get like, so we
We're
broke
nervous.
out a lot of little pieces so that we could make sure we get right up to the dollar. We're still fine. It came in right where we wanted. In fact, all the bids that we've done this year so far have been very favorable to the district, so we're looking very good. We have all contractors that we've had in the past. We have history with everybody that we've got in this batch. So we're really comfortable with all of it, so.
Great, great.
as you guys said,
And the same firm I see that's in one project is also a firm that's involved in the low bidder on the hot water,
Yeah,
either the second item as well, right? And we've talked about
And
that
we
one.
actually had asked them to bid it. We also asked them what would their change order price be, so we could look at both.
Yeah,
And they did not respond with the change order price, but they did bid it, and they were still cheaper than everybody, but that's a function of being here already.
yeah.
You're already mobilized, all your
thought,
team is
yeah.
here, your gear's here, so you can come over and do that. And they'll get going on that as soon as we can get it here.
Yeah, okay. And there's a lot of work in the first project,
This is a
right?
big
There's-
piece.
Yeah, yeah,
This is a lot of stuff.
yeah. I was nervous that, in terms of the title, and some people are jumping to the conclusion, you guys are spending, almost $2 million on a press box. No, there's all kinds of work in here, outside work, at virtually at every school, right?
The big pieces that you're going to see, I mean, we do a lot of ugly work that you never see, crawl spaces, boilers, roofs. I mean, starting Friday, we're going to do the roof on the backside of this building, because I want to get a jump on somewhere. You got to get something done, because it doesn't all fit. But what you'll see, the lights are in order already for the field. They were supposed to start next week, but we managed to have snow instead, so we can't. Press box is under order. The playground equipment purchase orders are all done. So it's all like, the installer for the playground is what you're vote on tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So we've already purchased those under state contract. That's all ready to go. So as soon as these pieces fall together, we're going to start rolling.
Great.
Terrific.
We're ready to roll.
Any
Timeframe
other
for all that
questions?
is this summer, right?
Starting this
Well,
summer.
start this summer.
Summer.
I don't know if it goes
Then it's
beyond
rolling.
that, but,
This particular piece, because we already did, the library is the only piece that will really go deep into next year. The rest of what we're doing is hopefully we're going to get it from now until early fall.
it's great.
That's the plan right now. But
And
we
and
should
I
be
have to
okay
admit,
with
I had to look at this a couple times, but you're right. After you go through it a few times, you realize that what they're pricing is not, not CO detectors or, it's to remove all this stuff. It's the backbone. I don't know how better to describe
It's
it,
just a lot
but
of little pieces. I mean, window
yes.
film, like most people, we're in a security mindset this
Mm-hmm.
past few weeks. Well, this is a safety issue because you have plate glass. All schools do that were vintage that you have. So if somebody hits one of these large pieces, like in High School West particularly, there's a lot of them, north and south, a lot of big pieces of glass. If they break, they're going to come out one big piece and cut you. And you've been very fortunate, but the state ed, they catch up to us. I know those who've been around a while, they caught us with some emergency lights and exit lights that we've been not doing. And we put it in a set of plans, and they're like, "You're going to do it this time." Well, this window film is one of those ones we've been not doing because it's expensive. And we're not sure that it's really beneficial. Really, you've been doing this for 50 years here, and it really hasn't been a problem. But they said you're doing it. The carbon monoxide is another one.
Right.
You will do it.
Yeah.
We put it off as long as we could, and now it's like you're not getting a project approved until you do it. So we're doing it. So a lot of the little nuts and bolts is what we're doing now.
Yep, great. Thank you. So all those in favor of that motion? Both sets of contracts approved. Thank you, Augie.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
Bill, I'm not leaving, I just want to take a walk back and forth. I'll get stuff.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Isolated. So we'll move to the budget proposal?
So
And we've seen a lot of this, right, in terms of...
So, I mean, with the board's indulgence, because literally we presented the same thing we presented last time, and not to discount staff members who are in the audience, but not seeing any residents, we would delay any further discussion until we get some additional news from the State Education Department. So if the board is okay with that, we'll forego tonight's presentation.
Yeah, just one question. I noticed that we had, the last time we talked about this, if they approve this, fine. If not, we had the two sets of numbers. It looked like the legislature has agreed that the one option would be preferred, the one that we prefer would be, but we still got to wait this process and negotiations. The good news, I think, is that because of the religious holidays, it sounds like by Thursday night, we should have something.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they have that three-day, I forgot what to call it, curing period, I think it's called. So most people, actually a lot of people are even thinking that maybe even by today, they would have something so they can wrap the whole thing up before the end of March. However, I think they may do that and use the weekend as a curing period and come back on April 2nd, depends on, some people take the first off, to do the final approval of it, so they'll quote-unquote technically still be an on-time budget. The interesting part about the revenue, right now, both sides have more revenue proposed. The question is, how will it be distributed?
Where does it go?
The special education piece is still a big concern for us, because we don't want to get $1 on one side and have to spend $1.50 on the other side. So we have to watch that pretty closely. So again, if we get some additional information, we're not only look at the two current conditions, but if we get a notable, sizable amount of revenue, we always have, when we do the budget process, we have tier 1 and tier 2 type things. So there's a handful, not a lot, a handful of stuff that we think if we get some additional funds, we may want to do, particularly if it has minimal impact beyond where we are right now with the tax impact. So we have a couple staffing issues that we may bring back to the board, but again, we'll provide a clear explanation to you, so you know the rationale behind some of those things as we move forward.
Okay, good, thank you.
So Mr. Smiley will come forward, and one of the presentations that we delayed from last time came from more of a question about every month the board is asked to approve CSE placements, so we're just going to briefly walk through just the process a little bit, not only the placement process, but even the appeals process. And I shared with you a study, independent study that was done by one of the state universities that basically it's a customer satisfaction study for the most part, if you want to look at it. And I think for the most part, students who are in the program are very pleased with what we're doing. And you'll see here from Mr. Smiley's presentation that we also have, when you think about the number of students that we serve, a very small handful of situations that actually go through an appeals process. So it's more information for the board, and then we'll entertain some questions after that as well.
Good evening. So the first slide is a graphic depicting the overview of the classification process. And a referral may be initiated to the Committee on Special Education by a parent or by the school. That starts the process. Once the parent gives consent, which has to be in writing, and it's called informed consent, which means that it's sent with a letter. It's a very formal process. Parents receive a parent guide. They receive a procedural safeguard notice, which is about a 40 to 45-page document that outlines their rights as parents, where to go if they need help or if they have questions. They receive all that information, and they provide informed consent. Then we go through an evaluation, which takes up to 60 days. Part of the reason for that is that the evaluation is a pretty extensive process. We need to review all of the students' past academic records, their AIS, Academic Intervention Services, whether or not they've progressed through the RTI process. We also conduct a classroom observation. The psychologist completes thorough assessment, including cognitive assessment, academic achievement, behavior rating scales, adaptive functioning. We get information from the students' teachers, and in middle school and high school, that can be up to 8 teachers. And then we have a CSE meeting, and we bring all the committees together. The mandated members of the committee are the district representative, which is one of the academic administrators, or me, the special education teacher who either works with the student's team or works at the grade level. Usually they have some base knowledge before they go into that meeting. The student's teacher, current teacher, is a mandated member, parent, and also the student, if the student is in 8th grade or older, or younger, if it's appropriate for them to attend. Some students start attending as early as elementary school if they want to, which is really great because one of our long-term goals in special education is student self-advocacy. So the next slide I have for you.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
can I
sure,
ask you one
please.
question?
Yes.
On the evaluation piece, are there any outside people involved in that? Outside, I mean, in terms of professional evaluators, information from, if a family's already involved with someone on
Yes.
some psychological issues
So
or
a
something like
student,
that?
a parent can always share information from an outside psychologist or an outside provider at any time. And the CSE will consider that information. It doesn't mean that the CSE will do every single thing that that outside evaluator recommends. And often those outside evaluations have recommendations for school and for home, for the parent and the student in both settings.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering if, after the first 2 steps there, if the individual is not going the IEP route, is there a 5-something or other plan?
There is a section 504, and we have recently changed our practice. Parents in the past have referred to the Committee on Special Education or to the 504 committee for consideration. God bless you. The 504, God bless you, is a plan for students that ensures that the district is not discriminating against their child by failing to provide them with appropriate accommodations so they can access the school environment. We've seen a significant increase in Section 504, partially due to the increase in ADHD diagnoses. Many students who have ADHD do not need specialized instruction, but they need some accommodations. They might need testing accommodations, classroom accommodations, so they may receive a 504. So in the past, a parent might refer to either, and a parent still might refer for either evaluation, but we now are considering CSE first, and then looking at whether or not the student requires a 504 plan. That way we can rule in or out if the student needs specialized instruction. So 504 plan, they don't need specialized instruction, they just need accommodations, and with an IEP, they require specialized instruction and accommodations modifications.
Now, the next slide you're going to show
Yes.
shows a constant pretty regular decline in percentage of people who apparently are IEP. Is that partly because now there's a greater degree of discrimination and more of them winding up with the 5?
So we're on the slide. Good. Okay, there's a couple of hypotheses that one may consider. I think the most important thing is that dotted line that I have in 2009-10. That's when RTI became part of the Part 100 mandates. Yes, so RTI is response to intervention. Prior to that, going back to about the year 2000, we had AIS, Academic Intervention Services, became part of the Part 100 regulations. And that came in part due to New York State giving the same assessment to every student. And now what do we do if students aren't proficient on those assessments? We're going to tell districts they need to implement academic intervention services. So following that, we have RTI that came into play because we were still missing a lot of students. We were just looking at students through New York State test score and teacher recommendation, and we weren't considering looking at the very specific deficits that a student might have, especially in the area of reading. And it also coincides with a lot of research being done in reading from the 1990s and 2000s that really has broken down reading skills. And one of the major points of RTI is to say we don't want to just classify students as being learning disabled if we haven't ensured that we've given them the appropriate instruction. And the appropriate instruction is going to depend largely on what their deficit is. It could be phonemic awareness, it could be decoding, it could be comprehension. We don't want to just give a one-size-fits-all.
I have a follow-on question.
Please.
We are atypical. Looking at the chart, you would think that perhaps everybody would have experienced the same phenomena and that they would also have had a decline. Is it just we're doing a better job?
Well, I, of course, would like to say yes, we're doing a great job. I think, though, that that's just part of it. I think that there's a couple of things that we changed. One was we would classify a lot of students coming in from preschool as speech impaired because they had articulation disorders. And we no longer classify most of those students as disabled because there's not an impact on their educational performance, but they need speech therapy. So we have been able to provide that through speech improvement. So that's a significant number of little kids coming through who have articulation difficulties. That's part of it. Another piece is we have seen an increase in 504, and I do think that's part of the reason our classification rate has gone down, because we've recognized that a number of students need supports through accommodation and modification, but not through that specialized instruction piece. And I think also population changes, and you can see that some schools have some kind of wonky things going on there, and we have just sort of had this general decline. I wouldn't say it's significant, 3%, and we've also seen a 1% increase if you look at last year compared to this year. So it's very complicated. Okay, so thank you for bringing me right into that slide. All right, the next slide, this is an overview of the CSE process, looking at new referrals and also looking at current students. So if you look at the first bullet on the left, that follows a parent is concerned, a school is concerned. They can initiate a CSE referral. And then the evaluation process for that is students are evaluated, the evaluation is completed, the evaluation is then reviewed with the parent, typically by the school psychologist, and then formally reviewed by the Committee on Special Education. It is a multidisciplinary evaluation, meaning it is not just one person completing the evaluation. Everybody at the table has a say into whether or not they believe the student meets the criteria to be classified, and the goal is consensus. Always the goal of the Committee on Special Education is consensus. The second bullet, starting on the left, is for an existing student. So if we have an existing student who has an IEP and there is a concern, either from the parent or the school, a program review may be requested. So prior to that, the parent would go through a typical channel of discussing their concerns with the case manager. So every special education student has what's called a case manager. It's typically a special education teacher, but if the student only receives related services such as speech or OT or PT, then it might be that individual as the case manager. Occasionally, the school psychologist is the case manager. The parent knows this because the case manager reaches out the first week of school, sometimes before in August, introducing himself. Hi, my name is Mrs. Smith. I am your child's case manager. All questions, concerns should be brought to me. So the parent has that contact right away. So hopefully, conflicts are resolved at that level, but sometimes there needs to be a CSE meeting. And again, the CSE will meet to review the parents' concerns. If there's any new or additional evaluation information to be shared, it will happen at that meeting. And again, the goal is consensus. Okay, so then the next slide. What happens when the parent disagrees? So you'll notice that there's a dotted red line about 2/3 of the way down. Everything above that dotted red line is an informal resolution. So the parent receives the letter inviting them to the meeting or the letter after the meeting. And that letter will say, if you have questions or concerns or you're in disagreement with the CSE, you may contact Michelle Mylod. You may contact Wildwood because they offer free advocacy services. It also gives a link to the procedural safeguards notice, which parents receive once a year minimally, but they can also access it online at any time for reference, which is basically, what do I do if I disagree with the CSE? What are my rights? So the parent may immediately contact me if they're in disagreement and set up a meeting, and we'll discuss and try to come to resolution. The parent may skip that and go to mediation, or the parent may meet with me and we can't come to agreement and we may go to mediation. Mediation is a service that's free. It's with trained mediators. I gave you the link in the presentation so you can click on that and access and see exactly what that is. Or the parent may skip both those things and initiate an impartial hearing. And that is a very formal process, but because there's a mandated resolution session that has to take place, it can still be resolved informally. So so far, everything we've done could be an informal resolution, either by meeting with me, going through mediation, or initiating the impartial hearing process and then having a resolution session. And again, always we're focused on resolution. We don't want to go to a hearing. They're negative. However, there are times that we cannot resolve our issues and we go to an impartial hearing. So everything below the red line is what happens once we start the impartial hearing process and we haven't come to resolution. It's essentially a hearing with a hearing officer, with a stenographer. It's a very formal process. There are attorneys usually involved asking questions. The hearing officer will then render a decision.
Hearing officer is who?
The hearing officer is appointed by the state. Attorneys can apply to be hearing officers. In the past, anybody could apply to be a hearing officer, but now there is a requirement that you be an attorney, and with good reason, because it's a very formal process.
Michelle, if it gets to that level, can you get out of that level? Like, could a parent say, you know what, I changed my mind, I want to go back, or once you're in that formal process, do you have to stay in it?
The parent can do that. I think we've had 4 full hearings. I'm going to get to that slide.
Okay.
And I think that typically once you're in it and you're sitting down, so much work has gone into it. I mean, certainly we the district are willing to negotiate a settlement at any time. So yes, you can.
And I had another question, sorry. At some point, a number of years ago, there was a change in law and the court decisions, and it shifted the burden of proof from the parent to the school district. Has that had an impact on the resolution of these things that get below the red line?
I would say no. I would say that when we go to a hearing, when we are unable to come to a resolution, it's because there's good reason. And we are sure as a district, which means I am sure, that we will prevail and that we are correct in what we are proposing as an appropriate program for a child. Because to go through that time and the cost of a hearing, I really feel like we need to be sure. Okay, so the hearing officer appointed by New York State renders a decision, and then the parent or the district may appeal that decision, and it goes to the state review officer. That's another state employee who knows the regulations and will review the hearing officer's decision and then determine, yes, that's a fair decision, or no, and it's essentially like a court appeal process, so they would have to cite why the decision was incorrect. From there, the parent or the district may appeal the SRO's decision, and then it goes to U.S. District Court. So we're currently in one case right now in the U.S. District Court because the parent has appealed. And from U.S. District Court, if there's another appeal, that would then go to Supreme Court. So you hear about the Rowley case, which was the big case that really set the standard for special education. That was a Supreme Court case.
Do we always bear the cost? Legal?
If we lose, we bear not only our attorney's cost, but also the parent's attorney's cost. If we don't lose, then we bear our cost. And there is a certain amount of coverage through our insurance carrier.
Let me just point out to the board, one thing where there might be a bit of confusion is on certain matters where parents appeal, the board is involved. You didn't see Board of Education anywhere in that, just pointing it out.
Right from the very start, you're involved.
Yeah.
Because you have to.
Because we make the original,
Right, the board president or vice president signs off on the hearing, on appointing the hearing officer.
I was going to
You're
say,
right, I
we're
didn't-
involved in that. No, I just want to say, we don't hear the case.
That's correct.
There are other things where we're involved. We
Hearing.
actually are in a hearing responsibility. We
That's
don't
not the
have
board.
that kind of responsibility.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay, so the next slide is a compilation of, I believe it's actually 12 school years. I put 10 on one of the documents, and I recounted it, and it was 12. And you can see the number of requests, due process requests, that we've had in a 12-year period, which is 18, which is very small when you consider that we have between 1,400 and 1,500 CSE meetings a year. So this is almost 20,000 meetings. We've had 18 requests. It's a very, very small number. We work very hard to come to consensus.
And those are requests below the red line you're talking about?
No.
Oh, period. That's what I'm
These are the, right, so these are the impartial hearing requests,
Here.
which is right above the red line,
Right.
correct?
So we have a lot of conversations up here, but when we formalize it down here.
Right. And when you go to the next slide, just jump ahead, you'll see that 12 out of 18 we resolved in resolution meetings. So we
again,
didn't
Michelle, that's
actually
up
go.
here.
Correct.
Right.
So
That
that the
yellow.
yellow coincide.
And then you'll see, so 12 we resolved that way. One was withdrawn by the parent, so the parent changed their mind before we actually went to the hearing.
Back to Mr. Gilbert's question.
Yep. And then one was dismissed by the hearing officer. So the hearing officer is able to look at the request for the hearing, and based on the request and their knowledge of the law, they can just say, this is not something that we can actually go to a hearing over.
So
You need
dismissed
to work
and the
it out.
parent didn't appeal.
They can't appeal that.
Okay.
Correct. So 4 cases in the past 12 years, we have gone to a hearing, and we have prevailed on all 4 of those cases. So you'll see 3, we prevailed with the state review officer. 2 of those we won. Actually, 3 we have won at the SRO level. 1, and we also prevailed at the hearing level. 1, the parent prevailed at the hearing level. We appealed to the SRO, and the SRO sided in the favor of the district.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, because I don't want the board to get the wrong impression. We use words like prevail, but at the end of the day, I think it's a key point where you come right here. The goal is consensus. And so while the parent may not get, in some cases, some of the things that they want is just completely outside of the norm, anytime we go through this process, there's always a degree of compromise to move to a point where, okay, we understand what you're saying, and we do some program things to ensure that maybe some of the underlying concerns they may have, those things are addressed firmly within whatever resolution we bring about. So it's not a pure of us against them. You don't get anything you want, we get everything we want. The process by itself causes some of this kind of, okay, we understand, but we've had some situation where people want particular placements outside. We're saying, no, we're not going to give you that placement, but the services that's necessary, we can provide here. So it's not, oh, you lose, so you don't get anything. You're getting what we have been deemed as most appropriate.
Or you're not getting the service in Cape Cod, we can find it in New York.
Yeah. Exactly. We had one of those cases.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And we have, as I said, we have one outstanding case that is in federal court right now.
Can I just go back and get clarification because of what you had asked about 504? Is this only IEPs?
Yes,
It's not 504s?
this is only IEP. 504s do not go through this same process. If you have a parent have a child with a 504 plan and you have a complaint, you are in essence saying, I believe the district is discriminating against my child, and you contact the Office of Civil Rights, the OCR, which is federal.
And so do you have statistics on that to compare?
The complaints that we've had to the Office of Civil Rights have not actually been because they believe there's a violation of the plan, but sort of a different kind of violation.
Well, I mean, good example. We had one where a parent protested how the grading process was.
Yes.
For special education students, and thought that the grading process was discriminatory against whatever. So it has nothing to do with the service provision. And so, okay, fine, we look at that. And so there's, so there's a difference between people protesting this type of services we're providing versus in this case was a grading piece that was what, maybe 5-6 years ago?
Yes.
And even the OCR ones, to be honest with you, I probably could count them on one hand. The ones that actually filed to OCR, the OCR actually accept, because typically they'll look at it, they'll ask for information, we send information, and then they're like, okay, here's a couple of things you may need to change, but for the most part, we don't, the OCR process hasn't, knock on wood, I want to jinx ourselves, has been one that we resolve pretty quickly because more of information sharing, so they understand the situation. We even had one recently, someone filed a OCR, not related to special ed, but just OCR related to some personnel stuff, and they came back and say, well, it was unfounded, so congratulations, you saved 15 hours of collecting information to send to us.
Okay, so there's a similar process for even above the line, below the line, red line.
But not as detailed, not as detailed, yeah. Because special education is so complex. And I would venture to say, Michelle, that if we have 504, it's more so people thinking that maybe more services should be provided. But I think back to Michelle's point where we flip the process now, where we start taking students through the special education process, that we'll be able to identify, do you really need special ed versus after the fact. Before it was like, okay, do 504, then do you need special ed after the fact versus you're saying, okay, if you need the heavy load or heavy dosage, we want to make sure you're giving you that now versus find out later on that you actually needed the heavy dosage 2 years later. So we want to make sure that we're trying to provide appropriate services as soon as we can versus after the fact. So that's why the 504 appeals process is completely different.
When we ship somebody off, if that's bad
Outside
report,
placement?
When we send someone
we
out.
refer somebody
Yes.
to BOCES for specialized services.
Yes.
Very badly put, sorry about that. If the parent is not happy with the services they are receiving at BOCES, who does that fall on?
That falls on the district,
That falls
us,
on the
yes,
district. Okay.
yes. The other thing this doesn't include is preschool. We have not received any due process complaints for preschool, although we do have some parents that are struggling right now because we have such a lack of providers. We have students that we are classifying as needing preschool services, and there's no one to give service. So that's really tricky because we are also responsible for preschool, but we are not responsible for delivering services.
Was that through Helping Hands before?
That's one
is
of our
one
providers,
provider.
yes. We have Helping Hands, New Meadow, There's a number of,
Okay.
and then there are also many private providers who provide speech, OT, PT, who have their own license, who don't work with any agency, and they're just approved by the county.
Approved by the county. I was gonna
Yes,
say
they have to be
county's
approved by the
involved in this
county.
process.
Yes.
So the county pays a portion of
Yes.
the bill.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the very
Yeah,
last slide
oh,
is just, last year, we had every year we have an SPP, a state performance plan review, and last year we had a parent questionnaire. So what that entailed was at every annual review meeting, a parent was handed a questionnaire. They were asked to complete it and then mail it back in the self-addressed envelope. They were also given a link if they wanted to do it online. And this was the results of the survey. So we had about a 20%, I think, return rate, which is pretty good. You know, a lot of people don't want to fill out surveys. And we had a 97% satisfactory rating. So we were pleased. We passed with the state. And, I mean, of course, I'd always like to be 100%, but I don't think that that's ever going to happen.
Do you ever reach out to them other than the survey? I mean, are there other ways to get a better response?
Certainly when an impartial hearing is initiated, that's a response.
Okay,
and-
that.
Yes, and,
But that won't be positive.
yes. When I chair a meeting, I certainly work to gauge that the parent understands, and I'm always trying to reach consensus, and I think that's all of our goal. Unfortunately, it's not always possible for a variety of reasons. A parent wants the very, very best thing for their child, as they should, and we aren't always there to give the very, very best that the parent thinks is what's the best. You know, we are there to provide free and appropriate public education, and we are also wanting to ensure that a student is equipped to be independent when they leave. And that is often, a struggle. Nobody wants to see their child fail, but as we've learned, sometimes failure leads to greater success in the long run, and that's for every child. So it's a very emotional, difficult situation to go through.
Are there metrics for that? So as far as the children that are entering that have IEPs, and how many are exiting high school, getting a Regents diploma?
Yes,
going on to school?
I am working right now on a huge data compilation that is going to look at, so every year I give my presentation in September, and I often try to throw up the graduation statistics. However, our graduation statistics are based on a cohort group. So what I've done is I've had Jess McCarthy, my secretary, go back and pull the cohort data. So let's say your child enters 9th grade in 2010. Every student who enters high school in 2010 is a cohort. And what we're looking at is what happens after 4 years. So I am compiling all of this data so we can get a really solid sense on why is our graduation rate for students with disabilities what it is. Is it because students are taking 5 years, 6 years? Is it because students are dropping out? Is it because students are being declassified? Is it because students are not getting a diploma but are getting the CDOS or the Skills and Achievement Commencement credentials? So I'm going through that right now as we really evaluate the outcomes for our students.
And also, Michelle, I think every year right before graduation, you share with us, of the graduating class, how many are getting, regions, advanced regions, but CDOS and all
Yes.
that. And it's really impressive, Naomi, to see the diversity of the different ways that our kids will graduate from this school. They graduate successful, and it might be at their own pace or their own journey, but they are successful based on what, supports they need, or they're the best that they can be as a child, so I'm always impressed by that diversity and what we can offer as a
Yes.
district. to
And we
these
have an
students.
impressive number of students graduating with advanced Regents diplomas
As well.
who have disabilities.
Mhm.
We do.
Yep.
Thank you. It's just a reminder to everybody that when you look at that number, almost 1,000 students
Yes.
involved in this, that's larger than a lot of districts. I mean, it's it's a major, major program here.
1,000
We
students
thank
this
you
year.
for,
In the current.
Yes.
thank you for
Okay,
the
you're
great work
welcome.
you do. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle.
So we'll move on to, we've got 2 action items here. One is to adopt the language of the formal notice of our propositions and annual budget. There's the reason we're doing that tonight, there's a 45-day notice piece, and this allows us to stay within that. Could I have a motion on that? Todd, a second, Bob? Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Motion's adopted. And finally, a discussion that we've had before, and hopefully this is our last time discussing this, is the adoption of the next year's school calendar. There have been some modifications based on local BOCES, which have changed what the recommendations were. Right.
Correct. They will be adopting those, so tonight what you have is a modification of our calendar for next school year. If you'll notice, there's two changes. The first being in December, that 21st, which is a Friday. We initially, you had approved that to be a day off. With switching our April break and having that Friday off now, which is an additional day, we're swapping those 2 days to ensure that we still have a 186-day calendar.
Have a motion on the, yes, Deanna, second, Christina? Any questions or comments? Gary?
I'd like to thank Dr. Robinson for his efforts in getting this situation resolved. All the things that were outlined as being detrimental to our employees, to our kids, to their parents, and so forth and so on, absolutely on the table. And some people were bigger than other people about resolving it, and he got it done.
I wish I could go that route.
Big thank you to you
And
too.
Gary was pushing as
Yeah,
well,
for advocating.
outside his BOCES area as well, as on the board of the other one. So this came to, it came to the answer we weren't exactly looking for, but it's one that there's consistency, and that was really
Yes,
critical to us.
absolutely.
So all those,
I have a
oh,
quick
yes, I'm
question.
sorry.
The half-day in October, so we don't typically do that, with the middle school giving a half-day off?
A few years back, yes, we had. It was traditionally, the middle school would have 2 half-days throughout the school year, in addition to a couple at the end of the year. And when we, APPR had changed and testing and the way we were doing testing, we switched it so all the half-days were at the end of the school year to be able to accommodate that. And now we're shifting back to allow for additional professional development time for the teachers.
Okay, so it's not because it's election day? Oh, wait, no, it's not election day, it's in October, never mind.
No.
Okay. So it's for an added professional development day? No, I was asked specifically what that was for, and I didn't have an answer.
Right. It's
Okay.
shifted from the half-day at the end of the year. So it's not in addition to, it's not anything added.
Got it.
It was
Yes.
already in there.
Okay.
Correct.
Did we do the all in the favor?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Before we get a motion for adjournment, just want to point out a couple things. So everybody have a good school vacation. And our next meeting is our business meeting in April. That's on April 10th. And Bob, while you were out, we did announce that the April 19th forum is going to start at 6:30, and we're going to hold it in the middle school auditorium. Okay? Other than that,
I'll just let you know,
Yes.
April 10th, I'll be in New York City, so I
Okay.
will not be at that meeting.
okay? And that's the night we'll be voting on our budget from our side. That being said, can we have a motion to adjourn? Hot. Who's faster than that? And Naomi, all those in favor? Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you.